Hello there. My name is Mackenzie. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you so much for being here. Today it is the Vampire Mega Vlog. So this started out as a Dracula vlog. So like Dracula-like stories and retellings. Like, let me bring you through the thought process, okay? Obviously it started with picking up this book, looking as it does, amazing, spectacular. And then I heard Noel Gallagher compare the characters in Wuthering Heights to a Dracula-esque situation, vampiric people, draining, that sort of thing. And then a Dowry of Blood came out, and I was like, oh, perfect, I want to do a Dracula reading vlog. And this was the plan. Since the beginning of the year, I planned for this vlog to happen in October, these 3 books, okay? It has since evolved very heavily. I picked up this book. It has nothing to do with Dracula. However, it does have vampires. So I was like, oh, perfect, put it in the pot. And then, of course, Woman Eating came out. And I was like, that is spectacular, amazing, a vampire book that I want to read and put up against other vampire books. And this could be an extension of not just comparing these books to Dracula, but also comparing them to other vampire books and what that media looks like. Add it to the pile. Then it was announced that not only did Alexis Henderson release this book, House of Hunger, about vampires, but also it is part of the Literally Dead Book Club pick, I believe, for November. Had to go in the pile. It just had to. If I was already going to read it, why wouldn't I put it in the pile? We have to switch arms. And then I heard about 2 new books because of Books and Lala, and I blame her entirely for putting these books on my radar and subsequently this TBR. They are The Pallbearer Club by Paul Tremblay and Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Kiste. Okay, so this one directly is about Dracula and Lucy, who is a character in Dracula, but also Rochester and Bertha, which I don't have on this list either, their story. So like, I wanted to add this one, and then I wanted to add the other one to compare those 2 as well. And then I have the Pallbearers Club, which Kayla described so beautifully about how it's like hearing a vampire movie from 2 movie theaters down. So I have a really, really big vampire TBR for this vlog, and I don't know if all of them are going to be read. I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't even think it's a potentiality for all of these to be read, especially considering there are other things that I would like to read with these, like in Reluctant Immortals. And there are other books in here that have nothing to do with Dracula at all, but are vampire books. So do I want to do a Dracula and then a vampire vlog, or do I want to just do one big vampire vlog? Any hoozles, in the case of this vlog, I will probably be reading these 3 for sure. So there is that, there is the intro. Now let's talk about the first book that I was absolutely going to read for the vlog, which is Dracula by Bram Stoker. So at my high school, you either read Dracula or you read Frankenstein, and I read Frankenstein, so I totally missed out my first opportunity of reading Dracula. This is my first time reading it. It's great. I'm having a splendid time. I'm on page 76, chapter 7, where we're about to get a cutting from a newspaper article. So if you don't know, this story is told through journals and letters to other people and news clippings. So you kind of get this strange, like, putting together of a puzzle of what's happening, and it really builds the suspense. It's a really cool story. I really enjoy it. Some of the journal entries are out of chronological order because they'll show you all of Jonathan Harker's journal entries up until a point, and then it'll switch over to Mina's and go back, and then you kind of have to fill in the gaps of when things happen to each other all at the same time. And it can be confusing, but it's much more like I feel like I'm putting the puzzle pieces together. So I'm really enjoying this. I will be checking in again with you guys when I get to the end of this, really, because we have a lot of books to get through, and really this discussion that I want to have is the comparison, not so much a detailed spoiler review of what's happening. So I don't anticipate too many spoilers for any of the books, more so a comparison of them. So if you view those as spoilers, even comparisons, I would watch out for when I go to talk into detail. If I do end up getting a little bit spoilery, I will of course tag that area so that way you can skip it. And then I will just see you next time. Told in a series of journal entries, letters, and news articles, we follow Jonathan Harker, who goes to Castle Dracula to finalize a real estate purchase made by Dracula himself. Jonathan, his fiancée Mina, and her friend Lucy meet Dracula as he is making his way to England. Hey yo, I finished it. Looky here. Look at all those tabs. I think it was a good time. It wasn't a great time, but it definitely was a good time. There is obviously being written in the 1800s, like rampant misogyny. Like Mina's over here solving puzzles, you know, putting everything together. She is the reason we have this like document of pulled, you know, pieces of journal and newsprint. She's the reason. She did this. And the men are still like, thank you for all of your knowledge. You need to leave now because it's too dangerous for you. Not to mention the fact that she has already been made a victim by Dracula by that point. Like, she's already in danger. This was also interesting in the sense that why does Van Helsing know anything at all? Ever? Like, there's one throwaway line where he talks about generations. There are mysteries which men can only guess at, which age by age they may solve only in part. And so he makes it seem like he is part of a bigger whole of like vampire hunters possibly, because he does not shy away from that word, vampire. But still, like, why? Why does he know anything? The writing is so roundabout. Just listen to this. He was, I think, surprised to see me. When I came into the room where he was and introduced myself, he took me by the shoulder and turned my face round to the light and said after a sharp scrutiny, like, that's one sentence. There's just a lot that's going on, that's happening. I'm tired. Like, it wasn't the best. And then, like, the ending, like, there were already some moments where when I was reading, I was like, okay, you're gonna call the candle wax that dropped onto this corpse sperm? I think you can calm down with that one. But then there's this afterword by Jeffrey Myers. Maybe I should look up who Jeffrey Myers is, because at this point I have no freaking clue. It's very like English class at the end, where he kind of talks about all of like the things and what they mean and how sexual it is, and like, you know, I guess it is. I guess it was meant to be. It's horrific to me. I don't know. Men are sexual, horrific beings. I don't know what he was trying to get at there. And I know that there are like sexual overtones of this, but like what he was saying was sexual was not, I felt sexual. More, at least not more than horrific. So like, I don't know. It's a solid 3 from me, dog. Misogyny, sexism, racism a little bit. All of that's in here. It's the good stuff. It's the stuff of history. So now that this is out of the way, I can go ahead and get started on, I believe, Wuthering Heights. So I hate it. I hate it. I'm not a classics girly. It's just not for me. I don't think it ever was for me. I think that it takes a lot for me to like a classic. And this just wasn't it. I didn't finish it. I read and reread chapters 1 through 3 like 3 different times. I remember nothing. I remembered nothing. How is language so boring? And like, I resent classics being taught in schools. How dare they introduce reading to children in the form of classics that is boring, and then they think that they don't like reading because all books are boring. No, the classics are boring. This was awful. I'm done with this. After being in a reading slump for like 2-3 weeks, not reading really at all in October because of this one and Paradise Lost, I'm DNFing. We're done with this. We're moving on. And I'm going to read something that I'd much rather read. The Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I'm glad I looked because I almost called them T.S. Gibson. So this one had swept the Booktube nation, and I'm ready for my own experience with this. So this is only about 300 pages. So I'll probably be touching base with you guys about like anywhere between 50 and 75 pages in to let you know the summary of what has been going on, and then I will be seeing you at the end of this book to chat and compare to Dracula. A love letter and a confession, we follow Constanza as she details her second life from the moment she met him to the final moments before she kills him. He did not let her keep her name, so in her letters she strips him of his. Hello. So I finished this. Kind of spectacular. So this book is kind of discussed in a couple of different parts, each of them gaining another wife, but also discussing kind of Dracula as a person, and also this like utter dread that comes from being a vampire, this loneliness, this depression, this melancholia that follows them everywhere. And sometimes they're happy and sometimes they're not, and sometimes they're making each other unhappy with how unhappy they are themselves. It very much reminds me of Interview with a Vampire in that sense, even though we're discussing the characters of Dracula. So the differences between this and Dracula written by Bram Stoker is that one of the wives is a man. He does have 3 wives, and then they do briefly mention the encounter that Dracula had with the Harkers and how depressed he was when that happened, but this glazes over that and continues on. This toys with the idea that Dracula did not die during the Jonathan Harker situation that happened in the original Dracula story written by Stoker. This discusses and hypothesizes maybe he just got away, and in getting away returned to his wives, and it was indeed his wives who ended up deciding his fate. And then there was an epilogue, kind of like a sequel novella. It's technically a sequel novella when you look it up on Goodreads. It's called An Encore of Roses, which instead of written in Constanza's point of view, it is instead written in the perspective of the youngest wife. His name is Alexis. This was a really sweet story on relationships and love, and while there is polyamory representation, I don't want to say myself that it is good representation. It felt healthy to me. It felt like they were having good conversation to me, and it felt like everyone felt loved to me. So I enjoyed the story. I thought that it was really sweet the way that they cared for one another in this undying way that vampires do, that there is so much time. They don't die. And so, of course, their love is enduring regardless of the changes that happen in their life, which is something that always draws me to vampire stories, is the melancholia and the undying love. Like, wrap it up in a bow and send it on my way. This was a lovely, lovely story. I really enjoyed it. Now, this was very hypersexualized. This dealt a lot with abusive relationships, not physically abusive, too much so, I would say. There is an instance of hitting, but a lot of like manipulation and gaslighting. If it's not your cup of tea, I don't recommend, but if that's kind of your thing, it was a lovely story for me. So now that we have finished 2 stories, gosh, technically we did 3 out of the 4 books already. I just DNF'd one of them. It just wasn't happening, you guys. You knew that. So we finished 3. We just have 1 more, which is Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Kiste. We follow 4 reluctant immortals who have transcended the page to live in our world: Lucy and Dracula from Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Beatrice and Mr. Rochester from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. We follow Lucy and Bea as they outrun the stories that made them victims. Hello. I have finished. We're at a new angle. We're at new shelves. It's happened. Anyways, it's always interesting when a book is written and you can tell entirely that its main goal was to get across a theme or a discussion point, and then you further get to evaluate it. Did it do that well? Bless you? And then you further evaluate, did it accomplish what it set out to do, and did it also provide a good enough story that complemented it, the theme, the discussion point, etc. And I think that this is a very good example of both doing it well, accomplishing the discussion well, and telling a unique story while it's still was somewhat of a retelling, which is very interesting, kind of complicated to do, but not really. It was a very well told story, and heartbreaking and sad and full of sweet moments of not really found family, but of standing together against tragedy and being strong for each other in a support system because you've been in that scenario before. So it was really sweet. It was really nice. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed everything about this story, truly. So I gave this a 4-star. So that rounds out our Dracula vlog. So here are the 4 books that I read for this vlog. Of course, we read Dracula. I gave it a 3 stars. It was passable. It is not truly something I entirely
recommend unless you're a classics girly, which I found out I am not when I tried to read Wuthering Heights, which I DNF'd. Tell me down in the comments. Let's have a discussion for the people who did and did not read Wuthering Heights. How much of their behavior is vampiric? How much of this is an abusive relationship of a man not really caring about other women? Let's in the comments, let's discuss. And then A Dowry of Blood, St. Gibson, spectacular, amazing, 4-star, lovely, highly recommend. It's very sexual, so if that is not your thing, not for you. Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn, Kiste, this also a 4-star, very spectacular. So overall, I feel like this vlog had some winners, had some losers, and hey, the man that inspired it all. We can't have vampires without acknowledging what happened in Dracula. So I hope you enjoyed this vlog. It has been a long time coming, so hope you enjoyed. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!